Hello, everyone. We'll wait just a quick second as people are coming in from the lobby. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll get started in just a minute or so. Thank you all for those that are joining from the lobby. We'll get started in just a second. All right, thank you everyone who's joining, and welcome to the webinar, CONA's Accelerated Journey to S/4HANA with SUSE and Microsoft, sponsored by SUSE. I'm Sean Byers from SAP Insider, and I have a couple of quick announcements before we begin. This session is being recorded, and a copy of today's recording will be emailed to you following the session. If you are joining us live, the webinar is designed to be interactive between you and the presenters, and we invite you to submit your questions using the Q&A text box throughout the presentation. We will answer as many questions at the end of the presentation as time allows. Joining me today is Uday Reddy, Director of Cloud Engineering at CONA Services, Ralph Klar, Principal Architect at Microsoft, and Neil Borstein, Senior Solutions Architect at SUSE. Over to you.
Thanks, Sean. So we'll go with the agenda to begin with. The first intros. As Sean mentioned earlier, I'm the head of cloud engineering at CONA. So we'll go through the S4 journey, and we'll talk about the key learnings, what we had so far from last couple of years during our S4 journey. And then we'll talk through the SDAF framework, which we used extensively to build our infrastructure. And then we'll also talk about SUSE support, how we leverage SUSE team to help us during the migration. So Neil or Ralph, do you want to comment anything before we go to the next slides?
Not really. Just say hello.
Thank you. Let's talk about who CONA is. CONA is a technological backbone for Coca-Cola North American bottling network. It standardizes processes, data standards, and solutions for production customers among our partner bottlers. We deliver services aimed at improving the customer experience, and also driving digital business advances for our North American bottlers. CONA is governed by 11 largest North American bottlers, which you see on the screen, and we support close to 80,000 users, live users throughout North America. Okay. Now we'll quickly go through the S4 journey. So the first one is we'll talk about the migration approach. So we had a clear, before starting the project, we went through the different migration approaches. Actually, we discussed about brownfield, greenfield, and also LT with SAP and other partners. And as part of the discussion, we came to a conclusion that we cannot use NZDT or DMO, right? And then finally, we had to switch to DOC. We started with DMO, and then we went to NZDT, and then finally we choose DOC. I'll explain more in the further slides on why we choose DOC versus other approaches. Okay. The next thing is the data footprint plus NSE. So our ECC footprint, which was running on DB2, was close to 45 terabytes. So we worked with our archiving team and the functional team to reduce the overall size to 38 TB by the time we started our S4 journey. This definitely helped us to minimize the scale out for S4 so that we can put all the data in one node, which is a 24 terabyte node on S4. And then we also reviewed a lot of third-party add-ons in our system. And then we had to closely work with SAP and our partners to make sure they are certified with SAP. Okay. And then we also had to uninstall a couple of add-ons as part of the migration. And during code remediation, we remediated close to 46,000 objects. So we use Smart Shift for our remediation during our S4 journey. And then the licensing and compatibility mode, as I explained earlier. So we have to work with our different vendors to make sure that they're certified with SAP, and also we have to validate all our functionality inside SAP to make sure they run as part of the compatibility mode. Okay. And this is a busy slide, so don't be afraid. So we, as I mentioned earlier, so we ran close to 17 or 18 cycles throughout our S4 journey. So initially we started with a DMO. Okay, and then we went to and then based on the recommendation from SAP, right, we started with NZDT. So we ran NZDT with couple of cycles, and then based on the complexity with NZDT and also the downtime requirements, we had to move our approach to the DOC, which is a downtime optimized conversion. Okay, so with downtime optimized conversion, we are able to reduce the overall downtime to less than 31 hours. And also it was less complex. We had more control over the overall migration when compared to NZDT. And also DOC also provides a method to validate the data between source and target, which was not possible with NZDT. And the cost was lower when compared to NZDT, and also we had high visibility for our basis team. Okay. And as I mean, as you can see that we ran close to 17 migration cycles, right? And we closely work with the SUSE and Microsoft. We used STAF framework for every cycle what you see on the screen. Okay, as part of the build. So every cycle you see on the screen. So we were able to use STAF framework to build all our systems. Okay, and we also work with
the STAF framework will be explained a little bit later. So that that is coming a little bit later.
Yeah. And also we closely engage with SUSE team to do a health checks as part of this build and cycle, so that way we don't have any issues post go live. Okay. And the testing cycles, right? So we performed many testing cycles during the overall our S4 journey. And you can we did find many fine-tuning opportunities as part of our testing cycles. We had tons of DB2 changes, tons of HANA changes on the target. On the source, when we started our migration during our cycle, we faced a couple of performance issues. So we had to closely work with IBM and DB2 team to provide the required recommendations, so that way there's no impact to this on the source side for our existing users. So we have to also update a DB2 patch to improve the performance on the source side. Okay, and all these cycles, all these testings were done as part of the DOC cycle. Okay. And one other thing I want to mention is on the target side also, it's not just on the source. The testing was done on the S4 box also, right, before go live. So we found tons of opportunities which can be fine-tuned, which were fine-tuned on the Azure side, and also on the SUSE side, and also on the SAP side. Okay. So this screen is more of a, which shows how long it took the migration during our final cycle. So we started our migration. We started the sum. It took close to 3 weeks. Right, we started our sum on March 31st. When you start your sum, right, it takes a couple of days to reach the replication phase. Okay, and once you reach the replication phase, then the replication will continue for close to 7 to 8 days. So we recorded close to 9 billion changes in our system for those 8 days. So basically, from source to target, we were sending data close to 9 billion records for those 7 to 8 days during the replication phase. Okay. And then once the replication phase is complete, you see we had to ramp down, and then we ran pre and post DTV. So DTV is nothing but the data validation, right? So we had to run the validation on the source side first to collect the metrics, and then post migration you run DTV on the target side to compare the data to make sure there are no data issues post go live. So Ralph or Neil, you want to comment on this slide?
No, really, that was a journey.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And as per the journey, as I mentioned earlier, right? So the only downtime we took on the source was to create triggers, right? Which was like 15 minutes of downtime just to restart the app servers. Because when they're creating triggers, we want to make sure there is no users active or no functionality running during the time. So that's the only outage we had in these 3 weeks on the source side. So which was close to less than 15 minutes. Okay. So, and in the conversion approach, as I mentioned earlier, so we explored multiple conversion options. So we had to finally choose the brownfield conversion and with downtime optimized conversion as a migration approach. So the reason for choosing DOC, as I mentioned earlier, was a less complex. We had more control over the overall migration process, and the cost was lower, and also the shortened downtime. We are able to reduce the overall downtime, the technical downtime, to less than 31 hours, and the business downtime was around like 48 to 50 hours during our final migration cycle. Okay. And as I mentioned earlier in the previous screen, so we recorded close to 9 billion changes, and we had around like 132K ABAP triggers in the system actually. Okay, and during our migration, there was zero impact to our customer or business users throughout the migration. Okay. And you can clearly see in case of any impact to our system, during the conversion, we would have impacted 190K deliveries, 180K sales documents, and 1.6 million units per day in case of any impact during the conversion, right? It's not, our goal was, the success of the migration was never in a doubt. At the same time, we wanted to make sure that during migration, there was no impact to our business users. Okay. And this slide gives a clear indication of what are the different activities or different phases of downtime. You can see we had a ramp down phase, we had pre-conversion phase, delta and delta F and MM conversion phase, right? So we had multiple phases. We had to closely work with SAP to fine tune with all these phases to make sure we reduce the overall technical plus the overall business downtime during these phases. Okay. And then the next thing this played a major role in our migration, archiving, and NSC. Initially, when we started our project, the S4 journey, so the plan was to do a scale out with 224 terabyte nodes based on the size of our source, which was around like 50 terabytes. So we had to closely work with our archiving team, our functional team, to make sure we reduce the overall size of the database from 50 close to 38 TB. And then one thing I want to mention here is during the migration, right? The data, we can't do archiving. So for 2 weeks during when you run the sum start until the end, you won't be able to do any archiving once we implement the triggers. So that's where we want to make sure during the 2 weeks, it'll grow up to 3 to 4 terabytes. So we have to make sure we do aggressive archiving before we start the sum tool. But the final the size of the sum was, the final size of the DB2 during the migration was around like 40 terabyte, and the target, right, we were able to achieve the target with around like 15 TB, which was a required memory by the time we finished our project. Okay, and we also moved close to 3 terabytes to NSC. That definitely helped us to make sure we don't do scale out. Instead of scale out, we just stayed with 124 terabyte node instead of 2 terabyte nodes actually. We just stayed with scale up instead of scale out. So NSC played a major role in staying with one node. So Ralph or Neil, you want to comment on this?
Yeah, just the 24 terabyte nodes are really virtual machines. That is something also what you, what we need to mention here. This is not physical hardware. This is really virtual machines in Azure, and they can be handled like a normal virtual machine. And And through this SDEF, this SAP Deployment Automation Framework, we were able for all those 17 changes. When we pressed the button, the system was getting back to the state where before that run. So all the process. So CONA it was very important for CONA that we have this automation in the background. That we really have those test cycles from exactly the point where we then can start again to prove and to do the new changes. And that was also, I think, during the whole migration process, very important.
Thank you, Ralph. And then next, we'll go to the builds. So we finished the migration. Now we'll talk about the overall builds, right? So in this case, we choose East and West US2 for our primary HA and then DR and DR HA. So we have deployed across 2 regions and then 4 availability zones. As part of the build, we have spun up close to 450 Azure resources, right? And this includes S4 DB, app servers, bolt-ons also, right? And then we conducted many workshops with both SUSE, Microsoft, and our other partners to make sure we fine-tune everything. And also we have done tons of health checks, right? One advantage of using SDAF is before we even start the project, right? What are the parameters which need to be fine-tuned? It was already part of the staff. So maybe Neil, you can comment on the health check. When we did the health check with SUSE, they could not identify any changes which we have to implement during the migration.
Yeah, and we'll certainly talk about that in a little while.
Yeah.
Maybe for that picture, that storage, what you see here, we leverage Azure NetApp files for this. So from our partner, ANF. So, and here we also, I think, should mention that you see that HANA replication in the middle. And besides this, we also do the cross-region replication from East US to West US. And by this, also, when you consider taking backups from a 15 terabyte database, this probably will take a lot of time. And what we decided to do here is that we take HANA snapshots and also then our automated snapshots with our AZ Snap tool, which creates application consistent snapshots. And those snapshots and those information, those consistent states were transferred over from East US from East US to West US, in addition to this HANA process as well. So that whole backup take only, let's say, from those 15 terabytes, probably a minute to take those snapshots, and in the background, the data gets replicated also to the other region as well automatically. And CONA is here instead to take any of those taken snapshots from the primary side to do the refresh from the QA system as well. And another very important topic as well is the backup. The real backup then, we also, what we do here, we have an immutable and indelible blob space. And that backup is taken from the DR side and not from the production side. And because you have the same data, of course, from production and also on the DR side, because of the snapshots we copying via cross-region replication. And on the DR side, we take the backups then to our blob space, which is immutable and indelible. So even special security those days is very, very important. And CONA is here in the position to restore every of those, let's say, 30-day snapshots to a secure state. Let's say, in case something happened, so those backups are definitely immutable and also indelible. So therefore, that is a very secure way also to protect the data. And as said, has no impact on the actual production system, because the whole backup is done on the back end from the storage system. So it's a very interesting but secure way to do backup those days.
Yeah, thank you, Ralph. And one other thing I just want to mention, Ralph, is our the CONA's goal, right, is to make sure that every month we run in different zone. For example, in East, we have deployed our systems in DBs in Zone 2 and Zone 3. So we already tested. So we have tested to make sure that the primary can successfully fail over to HA. Not just the DB, we also tested the app servers to make sure there are no issues, right? The plan is every month we do a primary to HA failover, and every quarter the plan is to run cross region. Basically, the plan is to run in West instead of East. We already tested this. We went live in April. From last 2-3 months, we have tested thoroughly. We have fine-tuned our workbook. So starting from next month, we'll be running our systems in different regions and also in different zones, right? Okay. And this is the second level architecture app. This is just, we just want to show that means I have one more complete detailed diagram with by application servers, but this is at a higher level. You can see every resource you see on the screen, which is completely automated. So it's not just Ralph brought up a NetApp, right? It's not just building VMs, right? In our case, what we have done is we have used SDAF framework through Azure DevOps. So we have deployed VMs, we have deployed network resources, we have deployed storage accounts, NetApp. Everything what you see on the screen is completely automated. It's not just deploying the resources on the screen. We also installed S4HANA end-to-end, actually.
Pacemaker as well.
Pacemaker, SAP installation. It's not just that. And what are the CONA Unix team or Windows team? What are the activities we had? Post activities for basis team also. That's also completely automated through Terraform, actually.
Yeah. And as I said, due to this SAP deployment automation framework, yeah, we are able, CONA is able to really, on a push of a button, deploy a system which is absolutely 100% alike on the other previously deployed system. And as Uday mentioned, completely with everything installed, HANA installed, Pacemaker installed, and also applied with all the best practices as well. So, and that is, I think, very important, but a very big benefit from CONA here.
Yeah, and also to Ralph's point, like this took close to 2 years for us to fine tune everything what we have done so far. It was not an easy thing to begin with, but our team had to learn Terraform and also closely work with SUSE and Microsoft team to make sure that we fine tune based on the CONA's requirements, right? And every time we deliver, it's the same quality, right? Same quality of builds, same thing. So once you validate to make sure everything is perfect, then every time you deploy, there are no complaints from business users or any other teams, right? From a quality point of view. And we are able to use this throughout the 17 cycles. So every time you deploy a system, it used to take close to 3 to 4 weeks. Now I can do it within half a day. So.
And I think it's important to point out, this includes, as we said already, the pacemaker components, the SUSE high availability. That's not easy to configure from scratch. So the ability of SDAF to do that from the beginning every time correctly is really key to the success here.
Yeah, but every tuning parameter, every settings from the SysCTL, everything is alike, and is and that is also the point where we reached really here the highest quality you can imagine, that every system looks alike. That is a big benefit.
Thank you, Ralph. The next one, as I mentioned earlier, so we deployed close to 450 resources for both primary HA and DR, right? And as Neil confirmed, we also deployed the SUSE cluster as part of that. And we also deployed not just the VM and SAP installation, the other Azure services such as storage accounts or app gateway, NetApp. So everything was deployed through Terraform as part of the SDAF framework. And then as you see, the quality improved a lot and the time reduced by 90%, right? We were able to deliver, and the cost also, right? Instead of having a lot of resources working on deployments, the same thing, now we have automated the repetitive tasks. So it's not just for S4. In the future also, if I want to deploy something, right, the team is more comfortable in deploying every SAP resources through SDAF framework.
Yeah, maybe a word of this SDAF. It is really a tool which is developed together with SUSE here in this context, and that, as I said, gives you the full scope of OS settings, best practices, and everything basically is defined in a repository. And CONA is now in state to say, hey, I would like to deploy a medium or a large size deployment, and really by a push of a button, this SAP Deployment Automation Framework, which is the long name instead of the synonym as stuff. So SAP Deployment Automation Framework. This is the name of this. In short, SDF. That tool, as said, is developed together with SUSE, and I think it reaches the highest possible quality assurance for our customer. And CONA, of course, did also a lot of feedback. That was really a teamwork between CONA, SUSE, and us. To do a hand-in-hand deployment and creation of this quality tool. That was, I think, very important as well. So perfect teamwork here as well.
Ralph. Next one, Ralph.
This is actually the picture of what I just tried to explain. The SAP Deployment Automation Framework. You see the your control plane on top of this picture. If we only look now at the picture, here you define your landscape. Here you define what storage is behind it, what type of VMs, how the quality checks are applied to this. You define this on that control plane, and then you create your repositories for non-production, production, pre-production, and so on. And from there, you are able to deploy the landscapes. That is basically how it works. You design it on the top, then you create your repositories, and from those repositories, you start the deployment in Azure on your landscape. And here, as said, since you have everything defined, created, the rollout, the deployment is always like that deployment before. So the highest quality you can imagine is applied here. And what we do as a Microsoft, we take those repositories and the ways how you can design your VMs, that is getting better and more extensive every month. And customer feedback, for example, goes directly into our development as well. So when we figure out that we can do something better with our customers, of course, we make sure that by the next deployment, we learn from our lessons from the other customers, and so the product reaches very high security standard as well.
Thank you, Ralph. And to be honest, the Hemant and Kimo from Microsoft team played a significant role, right? Making sure the product is stable, right? And get all the feedback from other customers. Thanks for everything.
Okay. And as I said, this is the SDAF, the SAP Deployment Automation Framework, is not only there for SAP HANA. We also can deploy SUSE, Windows, Red Hat, Oracle Linux as well. And as database, also a whole bunch of systems what we are able to deploy with that SDAF. So HANA, SQL Server, ISE, Oracle, DB2. So all those options are now then available also for the deployment meanwhile. That is the toolbox, and that, as I said, gets broader month by month.
Perfect.
And so we've heard quite a bit about how Microsoft and SUSE and CONA and SAP work together on the engineering side to develop the SDAF and all the great services that back up SAP systems running in Azure. But beyond that, working directly with the customers like CONA, we have additional levels of support. For example, CONA engaged with our SUSE Premium Support team to have an assigned support engineer. So through the last 6 months or so, leading up to the migrations, we actually had an assigned named engineer who worked directly with Uday and the rest of the team at CONA, as well as our peers at Microsoft and SAP and other partners, to provide break-fix support in case there were any issues during the project, and then additionally standby hours during go-live weekends. It's part of the premium support offering. It's highly encouraged for a migration such as this to engage with our premium support team. They add just that extra level of support. Having a named engineer, you're not having to go through frontline engineering to explain your situation again when there's a down system. You want to make sure the support engineer knows you, already knows what you're trying to do and is able to get you back up and running as quickly as possible. Thankfully, this did not happen very much during this project, but our support engineering team is there to support CONA and our other customers. And the next slide, we talk about what we mentioned earlier in this talk about the ability to do a health check. So in a project of such importance and scope as this, it's really important to make sure that your SAP environments are validated against best practices and the standards for SAP. The SDAF does a fantastic job of building compliant systems and clusters. However, there's time involved. There's always a possibility for configuration drifts and small differences that can make a large difference in running your systems. So we did do a health check of CONA's environment prior to the go live. And on the next slide, you'll see we had minimal findings as a result of the health check. The automation framework did its job perfectly. It wasn't nothing, right? We did find some very small things that were important to tune, and that feedback goes back to the engineering team to make sure the SDAF is building things exactly according to the SAP requirements.
Thanks, Neil.
Yeah.
And the next thing we want to talk about is the Llama. So it's not just SDAF. We also used SAP Llama to make sure that we automate all the tasks. It can be a stop and start. It can be a HA or a DR failover. So the goal for CONA is to make sure that either it can be HA or DR, everything is automated through Llama, right? So we are doing a planned DR activity. As part of the planned DR activity, we want to make sure we use Llama and document all our DR steps in the Llama. And one click of a button, it should make sure that it would stop everything on the primary and then bring up the resources on the DR side. It's not just for SAP. We also added the dependency with our bolt-ons. We use Leo, Vertex, and HVR as an example, HVR for replication. So we are making sure that we stop all these things in an order and then bring up the same thing on the DR side to make sure that there is no replication issues or there is no dependency when we bring up the systems. Right, and we have also enabled the fast restart option. Normally, to restart a 24 terabyte node, it takes a couple of hours. Instead of that, so we have enabled a fast restart option. We are able to reduce the overall, I would say, the stop and start to less than 30 minutes as part of the fast restart option. So, any questions, Ralph or Neil, on this one? Okay. If none, I'll go to the next one. The same thing as I mentioned in my the previous slides. So our goal is to do a planned DR and planned HA every month to fail over between zone 2 and zone 3, which includes SAP and bolt-ons. At the same time, planned DR between east and west through Llama. So every step, what you see here, the plan is to orchestrate everything through Llama. We have been testing this from last couple of months. We have some fine-tuning opportunities which we have to fine-tune with SAP. Other than that, so far, things have been pretty stable. Okay. And these are some of the project key learnings. So first thing, as we mentioned, like we have to make sure we pick the right partners. We had SUSE, Microsoft, SAP, and NetApp, plus Capgemini was our implementation partner. Right, we used a PCC connector for archiving. We use AppDynamics to make sure that. So one other thing we promised business was that all the transaction what business is using, we'll make sure before and after it will perform same or better than ECC, right? So we had to prove, the only way to prove was through AppDynamics. We are able to extract top 25 transaction, get a baseline through AppDynamics tool, and then we are able to compare pre and post. Okay, and then we ran multiple production cycles, right? The production running cycles on production data was critical for us. So we had to make sure that we do a copy from prod to DR, prod to non-prod many times and create copy of production before running any cycle. Okay, and we have done tons of optimization throughout the migration cycles. And then the architecture, we have to closely work with Microsoft and our partners to make sure we have the right architecture for CONA based on our plans for both HA and DR. And then we did testing. Testing was done thoroughly end to end on both source and also on the target side. And we used DTV for data validations, which was also critical to get sign off from business. That's one of the criteria from our business to make sure that the data should match between source and then the target after migration. And then we used automation for every build, plus Llama as an orchestration tool. And we used to have weekly alignment with our business and with our leadership team. I think those were the major learnings from our migration cycle. Okay. So any comments, Neil or Ralph, before I go to the next one? None. Okay.
Yeah, so I'll just wrap up with this. If after viewing this webinar, you want to learn more, CONA Services was kind enough to provide us with a published success story for SUSE. You can either go to the URL listed here or just Google SUSE CONA Services. It's the first thing you should see in your search results. You can download a copy of the success story, share it amongst your team, and ask us any questions. We're happy to talk with you about your SAP journey.
Thank you. So that's it. Now open to questions, Sean.
Absolutely. Thank you all so much. That was a great presentation. To our audience, as a quick reminder, we encourage you all to submit any questions that you have on what was discussed today. You can do so by typing your questions using the Q&A text box. We will answer as many questions as time allows. We did get quite a number of questions during the presentation, so I'll go ahead and get through some of those. If you do have any additional questions, please don't hesitate to put those into the Q&A chat box. The first one here says, how critical was the support you received from SUSE and Microsoft to the success of this project?
As I mentioned, like we worked as one team, right? We never differentiated either SUSE or Microsoft. They were part of CONA from day one. So we had some, I won't say it was smooth from day one. So we had many fine-tuning opportunities throughout the cycle, right? The partnership was really critical. It's not just Microsoft and SUSE. We had other partners also, like Capgemini, one of our other partner. NetApp is one of the other partner. We had to closely work with every partner to make sure this is a success.
Yeah, we really gave up our badges at the front door, and we worked really hand in hand together with the team, regardless from which party we were. And doesn't matter, SAP, SUSE, CONA team, Capgemini. So we were really through all the stages, really all together for the customer. And that was first of all a very pleasant working atmosphere, and I think also in the end very successful, because even though Uday, after that go live, people thought we turned back and went back to the old system, right?
Yeah, that's the other thing, Sean, I want to mention. Like many folks thought that we already went back because the system was so complex to begin with, right? SAP released more than 27 nodes during our overall migration cycles, right? We ran 17 cycles, right? They released close to 27 nodes, right? For the sum tool, just to fine tune based on our workload. Right? So that clearly shows the partnership we had with both SAP, Microsoft, and SUSE together. So.
Right. Perfect. Another question here from the audience. How did you manage FI customizing transport for DOC cycles?
The transports was with the help of SAP, right? We engaged the SAP resources, right? So we had to, so in this case, we did not use Smart Shift to move the transports. I don't know if the question was specific to moving the transports. This was a manual move, which was included as part of the sum tool. So we worked closely, and we had to freeze our transports After a couple of cycles, before we go to the final cycle, we have to freeze the transports, right? And then we have to move as part of the sum tool in a specific order, right? So any post was done after the sum tool.
Perfect, perfect. Thank you. Another question here. What tools did you use to validate the success of the data migration?
So this was SAP's DTV tool, data validation tool. So it is certified to use as part of the DOC, which is the downtime optimized conversion.
Perfect. And then what was the disk type used for data and log?
Ralph, you want to take it, Ralph?
Yeah, of course. And what we decided here was that we put the data disk on Azure NetApp Files, so on NFS. Yeah, simply that has the big advantage that we can take application consistent snapshots from the data volumes. Yeah, and the log files we put on managed disk with write accelerator. That simply also had the big advantage to change and also to share the bandwidth on that wire from that machine. Yeah, that we have the logs on block storage and we have the data on ANF volumes. Yeah, and so we make basically we take the best of both worlds. Yeah, to have managed disk for the logs and ANF Azure NetApp files on the data volumes. As said, from those 50 terabyte databases, if you calculate normally 2 terabyte an hour for a normal backup, yeah, that would mean that the database would be in backup mode for more than 7 hours. Yeah, and we do the same in 1 minute. So therefore, you see the relation, yeah, and also the magnitude of the benefits for this method.
Yeah, and also to Ralph's point, Sean, our major thing was the snapshots, right? So we don't want to take a traditional backups, right? The plan was to use snapshots, right? So we take 4 snapshots per day, right? Instead of taking backups. And the plan is to take a weekly once backup, a file system backup. And then every day the plan is to we are taking 4 snapshots every day. And then it's not just taking the snapshots, we are also replicating the same snapshots from east to west using NetApp.
Excellent, excellent. Is there a role that SDAF plays in ongoing operations? If not, what other applications are you deploying to support ongoing operations?
So ongoing with the ongoing operations, the plan, okay, I'll just take an example, right? So let's take, I have close to 50 app servers today in our landscape, right? So if I want to deploy one more additional application server, we can use a SDAF framework, right, as part of the Terraform script to deploy an additional app server. Okay, so we're also working with SAP and the SUSE team to see, for example, if I want to do kernel upgrades or if I want to do HANA patch update, right, how we can leverage these tools as part of the upgrade. So that's something we are still doing testing, Sean. But for the time being, any resources you build in Azure, as I mean, again, one of the example as application servers, we are using SDAF framework.
And I would also just point out, as far as the operating system patching, SUSE Manager is a tool for that, which CONA is in the process of implementing.
Yeah, we just used last week to do a live patching in our production, and we didn't face any issues during our maintenance weekend. So,
yep. And then other tools that are included with the SLES for SAP, things like Trento, our monitoring tool, which gives you the ability to, again, manage the configurations of those systems and monitor their ongoing operations.
Perfect, perfect. This actually might be a great segue to that, talking about different parts. When referring to the automation framework for health check, is this part of the deployment or does it require an additional license?
For SDAF?
Yes, that's right.
I don't think we paid any license for SDAF, Ralph, or Neil, you can comment, but there's no additional
license.
It's an open framework which is available in GitHub. Anybody can download and start using, actually. So it was, we didn't do any licensing with Microsoft or SUSE.
Yes.
Yeah. Now, the SUSE Health Check service that I talked about, that is an additional offering. It's consulting hours. It's sold as a package, and we can talk to your SUSE account executive about how to to sign up for that.
Excellent. Thank you. How long did it take to deploy one server using SCAF?
So as I mentioned, Sean, like earlier, so for us to fine tune the overall process, it took close to 1.5 to 2 years. So before even we started S4, right? So we were exploring STAF to install BW on HANA, right, on Azure. So our team was already comfortable using STAF, right? When we started with S4, it took some time, but now I would say if we have everything ready, like the host names, the network IP address, everything is already set. I would say within less than half a day, we should be able to deploy the end-to-end S4 system on Azure.
That's also the goal, yeah.
Yeah, but as I mentioned, like it won't happen overnight. It takes time for us to fine tune. Like as I mentioned, like it includes basis team. Just imagine all the activities what Windows team, the cloud team, the Unix team, and then the basis team used to do. So now everything is automated. So all 4 teams needs to be together, right, to provide their requirements to make sure we follow the custom standards. Right, STF can deploy with their own standards, but as a CONA, we have our own standards. We want to make sure that we also fine tune the framework to suit our needs.
Correct.
Yeah.
And it's another thing for the SAP Deployment Application Framework is that you simply can adjust it and configure it for your way, how you would like to have it. So we provide this box with all the tooling inside, but of course you need to tune it the way you would like to have it, and that's of course then how it works.
Excellent. Thank you so much. I think we have time for maybe one more question here. Would you expect similar results migrating from a different database such as Oracle?
It all depends, Sean, actually. So as I mentioned, right? So if your question is specific to deploying an application, it's easy, right? From a STF point of view, if you're asking using a DOC approach, am I going to say the same results? You might, but we have to closely work with SAP to fine tune a lot of things, right? As I mentioned, like when we started with NZDT, right, we had issues to begin with, right? When we started DOC, we had issues to begin with, but we had to closely work with IBM to fine tune a lot of things which they have never seen, right? As I mentioned, the amount of workload what we have in CONA, we are the second largest system in the world from a number of transactions point of view, right? So they might not have seen similar things in other clients in other places. We have to closely work with IBM and SAP and Microsoft and SUSE to fine tune a lot of things to make sure there are no operational issues during the migration cycle.
Yeah, maybe for that Oracle migration, just 2 weeks back, I was also in the US to join a team from a migration, and there we migrated a 200 terabyte database Oracle into Azure. That was not an S4 migration yet. Yeah, it was basically a lift and shift. But during that migration with all the, let's say, compression features, we came from 200 terabyte down to a little bit lower than 50 terabytes of data. And but the approach was exactly the same. Excellent.
Perfect. Thank you so much. This really has been a great discussion. That is all the time that we have for questions. If we didn't get to any of the questions, someone from the team will get back to you as quickly as possible. Please. As a reminder to the audience, this webinar will be available on sapinsider.org as a webinar on demand. And every single person in attendance and all of the registrants will receive a link via email. A special thank you to Neil, Ralph, and Uday for joining us today. And on behalf of SAP Insider and SUSE, thank you to our audience for your time. And we do hope that you have a great day.
You too. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thanks for everything, Sean.
Bye-bye.
Bye.